Welcome to my channel. Tonight, we journey through the forgotten river days of Willowmere, where quiet streets and gentle waters hold stories of the past. Let these whispers of history guide you into a peaceful sleep. Don't forget to subscribe for more calm and serene journeys. The forgotten river days of Willowmere. In the far northern stretch of the United States, the old riverside town of Willowmere sits quietly along a slow-moving river, its wooden docks sinking gently with age. The soft mist that rises each morning wraps the homes in a pale grey blanket, making everything seem slower than it already is. Only the sound of water brushing against the rocks breaks the silence, creating a rhythm that seems older than the town itself. People rarely visit now, and those who live here walk with an unhurried pace, following the calm mood of the land. Long ago, Willowmere served as a resting stop for traders traveling along the river. Boats once tied themselves to the docks, unloading sacks of grain and crates of tools. Over time, when faster routes were created and new roads connected bigger cities, Willowmere slowly faded from maps. The buildings that once stayed, busy now, stand still under the long shadows of the hills. The quietness here feels thick, as if the air itself remembers the slower days of the past. Each morning begins with the same gentle scene, pale fog drifting across the river and soft light touching the tops of the tall trees. The town barely wakes, and even the birds take their time before singing. The calm makes the hours stretch longer, turning minutes into something slower, almost heavy. The river moves without hurry, carrying small leaves down its smooth path. No one rushes here. The town sets its own rhythm, one that encourages long breaths and wandering thoughts. The old homes of Willowmere, built from the tall cedar trees of the forest, still stand with faded paint and slanted rooftops. Their windows look out toward the river as if waiting for something that no longer arrives. Inside, many of these homes are journals and letters left behind by early settlers. They wrote about peaceful nights filled with the hum of insects and the soft glow of lanterns. Those memories remain trapped in dusty drawers, untouched for decades. The remnants of the old ferry dock still stand at the edge of town. Long ago, it connected the two sides of the river and carried people, horses and wagons from one bank to another. Today, only the wooden beams remain, leaning slightly into the water. The river moves past them slowly, almost respectfully, as if it knows how important the ferry once was. Now the dock is visited only by the quiet breeze that passes through in the late afternoons. On the eastern side of Willowmere stands the abandoned sawmill, once the busiest place in town. Its large water wheel, once turning with the river's force, now sits motionless and covered in dark green moss. Inside, the air smells of old timber and cool moisture. Droplets of water fall from the cracked ceiling, echoing lightly through the empty hall. The mill no longer works, yet it feels alive in its quiet way, breathing slowly with the rhythm of the river beside it. Beyond the last row of houses, the forest paths begin. These trails, once used daily by workers carrying tools and supplies, now lie mostly untouched. Leaves gather in thick layers, and the trees bend toward each other, forming soft corridors of green. When the sunlight passes through the canopy in the late afternoon, the entire forest glows warmly. The silence here is deep and rich, almost comforting, blending with the soft rustling of branches above. Near the center of the town sits the old general store, its wooden sign faded almost to the point of invisibility. Inside, the shelves hold only a few remaining items: old tins, glass jars, and postcards showing the town in its younger days. The bell above the door rings softly whenever someone enters, though it rarely rings anymore. The storekeeper, an elderly man with slow steps, still opens the store each morning out of habit, dusting the counters that hardly ever get touched. As evening approaches, a soft golden hue settles over Willowmere. The river reflects the fading light, turning into a shimmering band of slow-moving water. Residents sit on their porches wrapped in old blankets, watching the shadows grow long across the land. Conversations are rare. replaced by quiet breathing and the creak of wooden boards beneath rocking chairs. The day ends slowly here, melting into a night filled with the gentle songs of waterbirds. At the far end of the town stands the old schoolhouse, a single-room building with cracked windows and faded paint. Inside, the desks remain neatly arranged, untouched for years. The chalkboard still shows faint writing from lessons long forgotten. When the wind blows gently through the broken window pane, the dry pages of abandoned books flutter softly. The school feels like a memory paused in time, waiting for voices that will never return. Far beyond the schoolhouse, the old footbridge stretches across a narrow part of the river. Its planks bend slightly under weight, though almost no one walks across it anymore. The handrails, once polished and firm, now feel rough to the touch, covered with thin layers of moss and thyme. The water beneath flows lazily, creating small ripples that sparkle gently whenever. Sunlight slips through the clouds. The bridge groans faintly in the wind, as if whispering old stories to the river. Below, stories that no one has heard in decades. At the center of Willowmere stands a small clock tower. Though the clock hasn't ticked in years, its hands remain frozen at an unknown hour, giving the impression that time stopped with it. The tower once marked the rhythm of daily life, ringing gently at dawn and dusk. Now, vines crawl up its sides and birds nest inside its wooden frame. The silence around the tower feels heavier than most places in town, as if the very air remembers the steady chimes that once echoed through Willowmere. Behind the clock tower lies a small garden that once served as a gathering place for the townspeople. The wooden benches, now worn and splintered, sit partially covered in fallen leaves. Flowers that once bloomed brightly have grown wild, stretching in every direction without order. The old stone fountain at the center still holds water, though the pump stopped working long ago. When the wind moves through the tall grass, the entire garden sways gently, like a forgotten lullaby playing for no one. On the northern edge of Willowmere stands the caretaker's cabin, a small wooden structure, once used by the man responsible for maintaining the docks. The cabin's roof has sagged and the chimney leans dangerously to one side. Inside, the air smells of old ropes, damp wood, and the faint hint of river mud. An old lantern hangs by the window, its glass cracked but still catching bits of sunlight. The caretaker left many years ago, but his boots still rest by the door, as if he intended to return someday. Not far from the cabin lies a long path leading to the river bend, where the water widens and slows even more. The banks are lined with smooth stones, each shaped by years of steady flow. The wide bend reflects the sky like a calm mirror, showing clouds drifting slowly overhead. Sometimes deer wander here to drink, leaving soft prints in the mud. The quiet is deep, broken only by the occasional splash of a fish near the surface. It is a place where the world feels paused. Deep within the forest west of Willowmere, there is a forgotten campsite used long ago by travelers and woodcutters. The fire pit remains in the center, filled with old ashes that crumble at the slightest touch. Moss covers the stones arranged in a circle around it, and the logs once used for seating have softened over time. The sound of the river can still be heard faintly through the trees, blending with distant bird calls. It is a place untouched by hurry, where the memory of past footsteps fades slowly into the earth. Closer to the water lies the fisherman's dock, though no fisherman has stood there in years. The posts lean unevenly, some sinking deeper into the riverbed. Ropes once used to tie boats now hang loosely, swaying in the gentle breeze. The dock creaks whenever the wind brushes past, sounding almost like a tired sigh. Small waves lap against the posts, creating a steady rhythm that echoes softly across the empty riverfront. In the quiet fields south of Willowmere, tall grass waves gently in long rows that stretch toward the horizon. The fields were once used for growing wheat, but now they move only with the wind. Old scarecrows stand scattered throughout, their straw hats tilted and their wooden arms sagging. The gentle movement of the grass creates a soft, rustling sound that blends with the stillness of the wide, open land. Clouds drift slowly overhead, adding to the sense of calm that settles over the fields. Deep in the valley near the river, there is a forgotten storage barn once used to keep tools and supplies. The wooden doors stand partially open, swaying slightly with each breath of wind. Dust lies thick inside, while old barrels and crates sit untouched in the corners. Sunlight slips through the cracks in the walls, forming thin golden lines across the floor. The air inside feels still and cool, as if time moves slower here than anywhere else in Willowmere. A little farther down the valley stands the remains of a once busy workshop. The tools have rusted, the tables have cracked, and the windows have turned cloudy with age. Yet the workshop feels strangely peaceful, filled with the faint smell of metal and wood that lingers from the past. When the wind moves through the broken boards, it creates a soft whistle that echoes gently through the empty room. It is a place frozen in time, quietly watching the river flow by below. The Willowmere Bell House, a tiny structure near the old ferry path, still keeps its silent bronze bell hanging by a frayed rope that no one has pulled in decades. The bell once rang to signal boats approaching through the mist, but now it rests quietly, gathering dust from gentle river winds. Travelers who pass by often pause, expecting it to sway, yet it never does. The stillness around it feels heavier than the building itself, as if time has wrapped the bell in a soft blanket of forgetfulness. Only the soft tapping of loose wooden panels breaks the silence on slow, foggy mornings. Behind the bell house lies a forgotten garden where dry grass curls against cracked stone paths, creating a soft whisper whenever the wind passes through. The garden once hosted small-town gatherings, but now only the remains of old benches stand under pale shadows. The vines that once bloomed brightly now hang motionlessly, giving the entire space a faded character. Anyone walking through can feel the air slow down, as if the memories of old celebrations are still trying to settle into the soil. Even the sunlight feels quieter here, touching the ground with a sleepy softness. Near the center of the old town is a small wooden sitting deck overlooking the river, where townspeople once spent long evenings in quiet conversation. The deck, now slightly tilted from years of river moisture, creaks under even the lightest step. Birds perch on its rails during dusk, staring over the calm water as if waiting for something that never arrives. The deck's fading brown. Boards still hold marks of old. Carvings, initials, and tiny shapes, scratched by visitors long gone. It is one of the few places where the river's long. Slow breaths can be felt almost directly. A narrow pathway from the deck leads to an abandoned boathouse covered in pale moss, its doors barely hanging on rusty hinges. Inside, the faint scent of damp wood fills the still air, mixing with the distant river breeze that slips through broken slats. Old petals lie scattered across the floor, some cracked, others faded by the years. The boathouse once echoed with the sounds of boats being prepared, but now only the quiet drip of water from the roof interrupts the silence. Even footsteps sound strangely soft inside, as if the walls absorb every sound. Farther down the riverbank lies an empty field where the town's yearly river fair once took place. Now the field is uneven, dotted with patches of tall grass and half-buried wooden posts that once held lanterns. The wind here travels slowly, moving in long, lazy waves across the grass. Anyone standing here can sense how time has stretched itself thin, leaving behind faint traces of laughter lost decades ago. Even the river seems quieter along this stretch, as if remembering the fair makes it slow its flow. Close to the field, an aging lighthouse stands tall, though its light has not shone for many years. The tower's paint has faded into soft grey, blending almost perfectly with the dull river mist. Inside, dust-covered stairs spiral upward into a shadowy quietness. The top chamber once offered clear guidance to passing boats, but now only empty lantern hooks remain. On clear afternoons, the lighthouse casts a long, silent shadow across the grass, stretching like a slow-moving memory toward the river. Beside the lighthouse is an old caretaker's hut, long abandoned but still holding the faint feeling of someone once living there. A wooden chair remains by the window, facing the water, as if waiting for the river to reveal something. The walls are lined with faded maps showing the river's old routes, yellowed at the edges from years of humidity. Each map curls slightly, as though tired from being upright for so long. Outside the hut, a water bucket lies overturned, filled only with fallen leaves. Along the riverside, a row of willow trees creates a natural curtain, their long branches hanging low enough to brush the still water. These trees have stood here longer than any of the town's oldest residents, swaying gently with every shift of the wind. At sunset, their shadows form soft, wavering shapes across the river's surface. Walking beneath them feels like stepping into a slow-moving dream, where every sound becomes softer and every moment stretches just a little longer. Even the air beneath the trees feels cooler and sleepier. Further along the path, a wooden marker post leans sideways, nearly swallowed by creeping grass. Once it displayed the names of small fishing spots along the river, but the letters have faded to ghostly outlines. Travelers often overlook it entirely, passing by without realizing its quiet presence. The river near the marker flows slower than other sections, gliding almost silently over smooth stones. It is one of the calmest spots in all of Willowmere, barely disturbed even by wind. Near the end of the riverside trail sits a weathered bench overlooking a bend in the water, offering a view so still that time seems to pause. The bench's wooden slats are worn smooth by years of rain and sunlight, yet it remains steady. Many visitors have rested here, letting the soft hum of the river lull them into a peaceful silence. On most days, the only movement is the slow drifting of a fallen leaf across the surface. The entire scene feels suspended, as though the river itself is taking a long, quiet breath. At the farthest end of Willowmere's river trail stands an old stone archway, the last surviving piece of a bridge that once connected two sides of the town. The stones are cool to the touch and covered in patches of pale lichen that make the archway look older than it already is. Beyond it, the path fades into tall reeds whispering softly whenever the breeze passes through. The archway frames the slow-moving river like a forgotten painting, still and peaceful. Anyone who pauses under it can hear the faint echo of water brushing gently against the stones below. Beside the archway rests a toppled lantern post, its frame bent and its glass shattered long ago. The post was once used to light the riverside path at night, but now only its rusted base remains rooted in the ground. The pieces of glass scattered nearby catch the late afternoon sun, reflecting small glimmers that fade just as quickly as they appear. Most evenings the post sits unnoticed, blending into the sleepy rhythm of the riverbank. The surrounding plants have slowly grown around it, wrapping it softly in green. As the path curves back towards town, a small wooden shed appears, leaning slightly to one side as if tired from standing alone for so many years. The roof is lined with old shingles, some loose, some cracked, giving the structure a fragile look. Inside, empty crates and woven baskets rest against the walls, left behind by fishermen long gone. A faint smell of dried riverweed fills the air around the shed, drifting slowly every time the wind moves. The quiet there feels thick and unmoving, settling comfortably into every corner. A few steps ahead, a faded wooden signboard stands quietly, its once bright paint now washed into muted colors. The sign used to welcome visitors to the Willowmere River Loop, but the letters have softened into barely readable shapes. The post supporting the sign is slightly crooked, leaning away from the wind as if avoiding its touch. Birds sometimes perch on top of the sign, creating brief moments of life before flying away again. The board has become more of a memory piece than a guide. Close to the sign, the trail dips slightly into a cool, shaded patch where tall trees loom overhead. Their branches interlock, forming a natural ceiling that filters sunlight into soft beams. The ground here stays damp, with small pools of water gathering after even the slightest rainfall. The air feels cooler, carrying hints of earth and moss that soften each breath. The silence is so deep that even footsteps sound like distant murmurs fading into the soil. At the end of the shaded stretch, a narrow dock extends a few feet into the river, its planks darkened by years of moisture. The dock no longer holds boats, but it still creaks softly whenever someone steps onto it. The water beside it barely moves, creating faint ripples that spread slowly and disappear. Sitting at the dock's edge offers a view of the river that feels frozen in time, untouched by the world beyond Willowmere. The silence here settles so naturally that even the slightest movement feels louder than it should. On the opposite bank, barely visible, stand the remains of an old ferry waiting shed, now little more than wooden beams and a sagging roof. Mist often gathers around this side of the river, making the shed appear and disappear like a fading memory. The river between the two banks flows gently, carrying reflections of the sky in slow, wavering lines. Sometimes a distant splash echoes softly, perhaps from a fish or a falling twig, but the sound fades quickly into the quiet. The whole area feels untouched, as though the river is guarding its stillness. As the trail moves back inland, a quiet open field spreads out, dotted with clusters of wildflowers that sway slowly with the wind. The flowers, mostly pale blues and soft yellows, add a gentle softness to the landscape. A narrow dirt path cuts through the field, worn smooth by the footsteps of the few wanderers who still visit Willowmere. Standing in the middle of the field gives a sense of wide, peaceful emptiness where even the wind feels unhurried. The field seems to breathe with the river's rhythm. At the edge of the field, a broken wooden fence stretches along the boundary, each plank leaning in a different direction. The fence once marked farmland, but the fields it protected have long since grown wild. Small birds perch on the planks throughout the day, occasionally fluttering away at the slightest disturbance. The gaps in the fence allow soft breezes to pass freely, carrying faint rustling sounds of tall grass. It is one of the few places where the old and the untamed blend almost perfectly. Further down the trail, an old weather-beaten milestone stands half buried in the soil, its numbers nearly erased by time. The stone feels smooth from years of rain and wind wearing it down. Travelers rarely notice it now, though it once guided people toward the ferry crossing. Moss clings to its base, giving it a soft, muted appearance that blends into the earth around it. The milestone has become just another quiet detail in Willowmere's slow and sleepy landscape. Near the milestone, a wide bend in the trail leads to a quiet meadow where the grass grows in soft, uneven waves. During early mornings, dew settles on each blade, making the entire field shimmer faintly before the sun fully rises. A narrow wooden gate stands at the edge of the meadow, though it no longer closes properly and swings gently whenever the wind drifts by. This place feels untouched, as if it has been waiting silently for someone to wander through. The air carries the faintest scent of river water mixed with cool earth. Past the meadow lies a long stretch of wooden boardwalk built decades ago to keep travelers above the marshy ground. Now, many of the planks sag under the weight of age, though they still hold together out of quiet stubbornness. The boardwalk creaks softly with every step, sounding almost like a distant whisper. Beneath it, still pools of water reflect patches of sky that drift lazily above. Walking here feels like moving slowly through a place forgotten by urgency. At the end of the boardwalk stands a nearly collapsed storage hut, once used to keep fishing nets and small tools. Its roof has partially caved in, allowing beams of sunlight to fall across the dusty floor in soft patches. A few tangled nets still lie inside, stiff with age and covered in dry moss. The hut feels frozen in a moment that passed long ago, holding on to objects no one will ever use again. Even the air inside feels heavy and unmoving. Beside the old hut, the trail widens into a quiet clearing surrounded by short, sturdy bushes. The clearing is often visited by small animals. though they move with the same slow calmness that the town itself seems to encourage. In the evenings, the clearing fills with the soft glow of fireflies drifting lazily above the ground. The faint buzzing of distant insects blends into the deep quiet, creating a sleepy rhythm that lingers in the air. It's a place where the day feels reluctant to end. Past the clearing, an old wooden footbridge crosses a narrow stream that feeds into the Willowmere River. The bridge is thin, its boards worn smooth and pale from decades of weather. The stream below trickles softly, its sound blending seamlessly with the distant river. Sometimes fallen leaves drift beneath the bridge, moving slowly as if hesitant to continue their journey. The air here always feels slightly cooler, carrying with it a gentle sense of calm. On the other side of the footbridge, the land opens into a stretch of gentle hillocks covered with soft grass. These small rises create slow, rolling shadows when clouds drift overhead. Few people climb these hills now, but those who do often find themselves pausing halfway, simply to listen to the muted hum of distant wind. The hills offer a peaceful view of the river bending quietly through the landscape. Everything here feels distant yet comforting. At the base of one hill rests a large, flat stone that locals once used as a resting spot. Time has smoothed its surface, leaving it cool even on warm afternoons. The stone sits near a cluster of thin birch trees, their white bark peeling gently in long, narrow strips. Sitting here offers a view of the river and the far-off outline of Willowmere's old lighthouse. The stillness is so complete that even the smallest breeze feels significant. Farther along the path, a cluster of unused wooden barrels sits stacked beside a leaning fence. Their surfaces are cracked and faded, with metal bands rusting quietly in place. These barrels once carried goods brought in by small boats that visited the town, but they now serve only as reminders of quieter trade days. Grass has grown through their bases, anchoring them firmly where they rest. The whole scene feels gently forgotten. Beyond the barrels, the trail leads to a soft, moss-covered embankment that slopes gradually toward the river. The moss forms a thick carpet, cool and spongy underfoot, muffling every sound. The river here widens slightly, moving in long, slow currents that catch the light in gentle flashes. Occasionally, a dragonfly hovers above the water, its wings shimmering briefly before disappearing into the reeds. The quiet feels deep, almost protective. Nearby, a long-abandoned rowboat lies flipped on its side, its paint peeled into soft flakes. The wood has taken on a pale silver tone from years of sun and rain. Grass grows tall around it, almost hiding the boat from view except for its distinctive curved shape. The boat seems to be resting, no longer meant to touch the water. It has become a part of the quiet landscape, blending naturally with the soft colors of the riverbank. A few steps ahead, a tall sycamore tree rises above the river, its thick trunk marked with deep grooves from age. The branches spread wide, casting cool, gentle shade over the path. Some of the leaves flutter lightly even when the air seems still, as though the tree breathes on its own. The river below reflects the tree's image in a slow, wavering outline. Many visitors pause here without realizing why. The spot simply feels restful. On the river's edge, near the sycamore, flat stones lead down to the water, arranged in a gentle slope. These stones were once used by townspeople to wash clothes or rest their feet on warm afternoons. Now they sit mostly untouched, warmed quietly by the sun. The river laps softly against them, creating a repetitive rhythm that feels soothing and unhurried. Even the smallest wave takes its time to settle. Moving farther down the bank, a line of cattails sways quietly, their brown tops rustling softly. These plants thrive in the shallow water, forming a natural barrier between the river and the land. The sound of the cattails brushing together creates a steady, gentle whisper that blends perfectly with the river's slow flow. Beyond them, The water stretches into soft ripples that dissolve into the distance. The entire area feels wrapped in a warm, sleepy quiet. At a curve in the river, an old wooden sign marks the entrance to Willowmere's forgotten picnic ground. The painted letters have chipped away, leaving only faint outlines behind. The picnic area itself is overgrown with tall ferns and grasses, giving the place a soft, muted look. Old stone fire rings sit half buried in the soil, long unused. Even the breeze seems gentler here, carrying the faint scent of pine and river mud. Past the picnic ground, a narrow rise leads to a ridge that overlooks the widest part of the river. The view from this ridge is calm and open, with smooth water stretching far into the hazy distance. Birds glide slowly across the sky, their reflections softening on the river's surface. The wind here carries a slow, sweeping sound that feels almost like a quiet sigh. Standing on the ridge makes the whole town seem like a small, gentle memory. Descending from the ridge, the trail enters a patch of soft earth, shaded by towering oaks. Their leaves form a thick canopy overhead, turning sunlight into scattered, gentle patterns on the ground. The soil here feels cool, giving each step a quiet softness. Occasionally, a single acorn drops from above, landing with a muted thud. It's the only sound that breaks the deep stillness of the place. Beyond the oaks, a small stone wall runs parallel to the trail, its structure partly crumbled from age. Moss grows thick between the stones, binding them together in soft green patches. The wall once marked the property line of an old farm, but now it simply blends into the surrounding land. The tall grass around it sways slowly, brushing gently against the worn stones. The air feels thick with quiet history. At the far edge of the wall, the trail reaches a broad overlook where the river bends for the final time before vanishing behind thick woods. The overlook is flat and lined, with a few scattered stones that serve as natural seats. From here, the river looks both distant and near, moving with a slow certainty that soothes anyone who watches long enough. Even the sky seems quieter, its colors blending into soft tones above the water. This place feels like Willowmere's last gentle exhale. A few yards past the overlook, the trail narrows into a final passage surrounded by thick shrubs. The path is soft and slightly overgrown, showing that only a handful of people ever reach this far. The shrubs rustle lightly with each passing gust of wind, creating a gentle rhythm that echoes the river's distant murmur. This stretch feels like a quiet farewell from the land, a reminder of how softly time moves in Willowmere. The stillness here is almost complete. At the trail's final stop, a weathered stone marker sits beside the river's edge, marking the end of Willowmere's forgotten path. The marker leans slightly, worn down by years of rain, yet still standing as a quiet witness to everything the river has carried over time. The water flows past it in slow, steady movements, catching the last touches of fading daylight. This is where the silence settles deepest, as though the river itself invites anyone who arrives to rest. Willowmere ends not with noise, but with a soft, timeless quiet.